She had like.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of CB11's Executive Committee meeting. My name is Xavier Santiago. I'm the chair of the committee. This meeting is officially called to order at 6:39 p.m. Tonight, we're joined by Angela Skane, our manager, who is the staff liaison to our committee. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. 1, no one may speak until granted the floor. 2, CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. To raise your hand through Zoom, click the participants icon, and you will find the raise hand function there. If you have a technical difficulty, click in the chat icon and relay your difficulty to the staff. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. The chat should be disabled in general for tonight, except for those board members. Topics should all be and remarks should all be on the record and relevant to the topic of conversation. Please keep your questions, comments brief and on topic to the discussion. Final note for everyone, I've been attending most of the meetings via Zoom. I'm going to remind everyone it is nauseating to watch the owl spin around and around and around when people have crosstalk. So please just raise your hand. I'll recognize you, and that way the owl can focus on you, and so can everyone else who's observing the meeting in the public. Also, a little note, please silence your phones like you're in the movie theater. So, next, for members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. We will also ask you to identify yourself for the public record. We will now take attendance by roll call. Committee members, please answer present when your name is called.
Jose Altamirano. Present. Stephanie Arroyo.
Present.
Madame Brija. Jessica Elliott.
Present.
David is excused. John is excused. Giselle. Nosa Rama.
Present.
Xavier Santiago.
Present.
Isaac Scott.
Present.
Jason Villanueva is excused. Michelle Witcher-Clement is excused. We have quorum.
Thank you very much, Angel. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was posted online. If there are no objections, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Committee members, if you object to adopting the agenda in the original, be recognized. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from our last meeting were distributed to committee members ahead of time by the board office. If there are no objections, we will adopt the minutes from that meeting. Committee members, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand and be recognized. Seeing no hands raised, the minutes are adopted from our last meeting. Please count Giselle as present. Okay, on to our announcements. Real quick, just want to welcome everyone back. We're glad to be back. Thank you, everyone. I want to applaud many people at this table and other board members. As an announcement going forward, just great job. We had more people at public events and weekly events than we did pre-COVID. And I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for showing up and participating. And I'm going to insist that we carry on with that trend. This committee is being seen, the community board is being seen, and let's keep leading by example. So I just wanted to applaud everyone on that. So it's more of a praise than announcement. Any announcements? Yes.
I think we need more shirts so we can continue to be out there, especially the light blue one. It's like that.
Copy that. Angel, if you wouldn't mind, if we could see if we had any extra shirts or if it's in the budget, if we could.
I'd like
explore
a
that.
crew neck one, if possible.
Okay, the golfing shirt.
You know, a little lower.
All right.
Hold on.
No other announcements there, but I like the recommendation. Thank you. Any informational updates? Please raise your hands. That there are none. All right, we will move on to our presentations and discussions. We have a presentation from LPC, an application for Metropolitan Museum of Art. We've allotted 10 minutes, and we have Natalie Omari, who is attending. Natalie? Or is someone else attending?
Hi, Natalie's here, and also I'm Brett Guyard from Capital Planning.
Okay, welcome aboard. Let's, you have 10 minutes allotted, so please.
Thank you. I'm sorry not to be there with you in person. Unfortunately, I have COVID, so it's better that I'm not there with you all, but I will be for future presentations, hopefully, if we are invited back. So I am going to share my screen, if that's okay. So it says there we go. You cannot start screen sharing. Let's see if I can do it now.
Should be good now.
Okay, thank you.
Great
Let's see.
job. It's in the video angle.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Brett Gard. I'm the head of capital planning at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And the architect for this project is Buyer Blinder Bell, but I'm here on behalf of the Met and the architect to present the project to you all. This is a fairly small but important project to us. And we're coming before you to discuss the installation of 4 screens permanently in areas adjacent to the Great Hall. So I'll just go through the presentation with you all and then stop sharing and we can answer questions. So just to orient everybody, I'm sure you're all aware, but the interior of the Great Hall at the Metropolitan Museum of Art is one of the few interior landmarks in the city. There's not that many of these. I think there's about 30 total. So anytime we make any change in this interior landmark space, we go through the landmarks process. Sometimes it's a certificate of no effect. Sometimes it's a public hearing process. And right now we're in a public hearing process for the installation of the 4 screens. And the reason is because even though the installation will be entirely reversible, because they're digital displays, there's a rule with landmarks that you're required to have a public hearing. So that's why we're here today. And I think we've seen 4 community boards before you. So I think you may be our last one just because of scheduling. So this is the interior space of the Great Hall. I'm sure many of you have been in this space. You come in the door, you go through security, and then you're in the main space of the Great Hall. The areas that we're going to be talking about today, I hope you can see my hand moving around, are on the north side and the south side of the Great Hall, but this is part of the interior designated landmark. So even though it's not in the limestone space of the main Great Hall, it's adjacent to it and it's part of the designated interior. This is an elevation looking at that space from 2 directions, and I think the photographs are probably a little more helpful. So these are some fun photographs of the Great Hall from the time it was built, and we'll kind of move through time. This is the 1902 Richard Morris Hunt building. So this was the first building that faced Fifth Avenue. And at one point, the McKim and White wings on either side weren't there, so that light coming was actually a window on the other side. So the colonnade here, and then the little vestibule next to it is part of the designated space. So this is from 1902. This is a view from 1907. You can see the changes over time to the space, 1917, 1940s. Oop, here we go. 1992, this is when Kevin Roche did a big restoration of the Great Hall interior and put benches and plants. And this was kind of the first time an information desk was put in. It's not the information desk you see now. This was an older version, but now you can see a view from 2023 looking at the Great Hall. And in this view, you can see a screen on the right and a screen on the left. And these screens were installed temporarily. Sorry, let me go back. Temporarily during the COVID-19 crisis in 2020. We had been thinking actually about putting screens there in 2019 because we wanted to stop having so much printed material. We'll always have printed maps, and certain material will be printed that has a long life, like things like maps and information about the museum generally. But we were printing a lot of information on a daily and weekly basis about events that were happening at the museum. And so there was a thought, like, how could we minimize our footprint in terms of printing and still get information to our visitors? So we had started looking into it then. And then during the COVID-19 crisis, with information constantly changing on such a frequent basis, we wanted a way to get that information to our visitors. So we spoke to Landmarks about temporarily installing these screens, and now we've kind of evaluated how they've worked, and we'd like to make them permanent. We think that they've been really helpful for our visitors. And so that's what we're here today to talk about. This is a view from 2012. Some of you may remember we used to have these kind of booths at all the sides of the museum. And in 2019, these were removed. And this was reviewed with Landmarks and approved at a staff level, because essentially we were restoring what used to be there, which was the colonnades being open. So these were removed. And then a ticketing hall was created outside of the landmark designated space in one of the 4 quadrants. And this is just you showing what that desk looks like. And then there's screens behind. So this was kind of the first time this is a picture from 2021, but this was installed in 2019. And this shows, how we were kind of using information and the ability to change it. And it was working quite well for us. So the proposed design is to permanently install 4 screens, 2 on either side in the vestibules adjacent to the Great Hall. And the walls are plaster walls. So these are, you've probably seen this kind of salmon color that the walls are painted. So this is where the screens would go. And the goal would be that these would read more as posters. So it would not be animated information changing constantly, but information that we could change on a daily or weekly basis as events unfolded at the museum. One side will always have a map and exhibitions that are happening at a smaller scale, and then events that are happening on a daily or weekly basis. So you can see here, the goal is to have them in kind of 3 sections. We actually at one point looked at doing 3 separate screens on either side for a total of 6, but that was a lot more power data holes in the wall. So we decided to go for 1 screen on either side. And you can see it says things like we're open late tonight until 9. So on Fridays, we're open late. And this is a way for our visitors to see that information without having to print it and hand it out. In the red dash line is the location of the temporary screens that we installed. The power and data was there, and we put the screens here. For our final proposal, we would like to do a slightly smaller screen and center the screens on the wall. This is because the screen, we initially thought that the screens would go here because we were going to have some mobile desks in front of it. We've decided not to do that. The screens have been damaged with people kind of walking around the corner. So we want to move them away from the corner, and we want to do a slightly smaller screen because we think it looks better and mount it in a slightly different way closer to the wall. The screens that we got in 2020 were basically just the screens that were available at the time. There was a lot of supply chain issues, as some of you have probably dealt with. So we were now able to get the screens that we actually wanted, which is why we're proposing to change what was approved temporarily. So this, I think my computer is just taking a little while to load, but this is just a detailed drawing showing plan and elevation, looking at the south side. And so you can see there's existing security cameras here. There's a digital clock that's already here. And we would be mounting a bracket to the wall with the screens. There's already power and data in a box there. The existing plaster would remain, and were we to remove these at some point in the future, we would take the bracket off and repair the wall, patch and paint the wall. So Buyer Blenderbell's come up with a detail that's entirely reversible were we to decide to take these down or do something different in the future. This is just another detailed view looking at the exact same thing on the other side. So it's mirror images of each other. And I apologize, my computer is just kind of loading slowly with the drawings. But this is the view on the other side, on the north side. And then this is a photograph looking at the temporary display screens that were installed. So you can see one on either side. And then another view of the temporary display screen. So the screens that we're proposing are slightly smaller and more centered on the wall. And this is another photograph of the temporary display screens, just so you can see what it looks like from the side and from the front. And then this is a photo montage of the proposed display screen installation. It's more centered on the wall. It's a slightly smaller screen. Again, looking at the photos of existing things in the Great Hall, just to kind of see that there are some screens already visible. And then the mounting detail, which we talked to Landmarks about, and the type of bracket that we're going to use so that it's tight to the wall, not sticking out. So that's the presentation. I'll stop sharing just so I can see you, and I'm happy to pull up any slides if you have questions.
Any questions from our board members? Yes.
So, this is only a request to do those changes, not a request to the city for any funds for this, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, so we're not asking for any money for this. We're funding this ourselves. It's just for Landmarks.
And I have 2 more questions.
Yeah.
How long, like, is this gonna stop the flow of traffic of people coming in, and how long do you expect that to be?
Yeah, so we studied this a little bit actually, because we had them up temporarily, and our visitor flows during the kind of height of the COVID crisis when we reopened were very different than like how they are now. And so we've been watching this to see if we wanted to even keep the screens there at all. And the way that people go in is they actually go through the two, there's 4 columns, and they go through the 2 middle ones to get in. And then if they need information, they step to the side. So it actually hasn't been altering our flow at all. People just kind of will step aside and look at the information and then go back through the center.
No, I meant like with the installation, like, do you know how long it's gonna take? Is it gonna affect like people coming in?
Oh, no, sorry. We would just pop them in overnight. I mean, it's
Gotcha.
very fast. Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. Any other questions from our board members?
Yeah, I have a question. Forgive me for not being familiar with the process. So every single time y'all want to make a change in that big museum, as small as the TVs on those walls, y'all have to go to different community boards to let people know about it?
Yeah, so how it works is there's kind of 2 processes. Because the whole building itself is a designated New York City landmark, anytime we make any change, we have to go through landmarks for what's called a certificate of no effect if it's something that doesn't affect the facade or a landmark space. And it's a box that gets checked so we can get our permit. And that's like a pretty straightforward process. We don't go through the community board process for that. But anytime we make a change to an area that's designated as like the facade, the whole exterior of the building, or anything in the Great Hall, which is the only interior. So it's not the whole interior of their museum, which is like 2.1 million square feet. It's just that part. Because it's a designated interior landmark and there's so few of them in the city, we go through this process. Now, sometimes we're not making a change that's significant or that's entirely reversible, and it can be approved for a certificate of appropriateness at a staff level at landmarks. But I think it was a result of the screens that were put in Grand Central, which was like 10 years ago, maybe less than that, 8 years ago. There's a new rule now at landmarks that anything digital in an interior landmark designated space must go through this process. And because we're in Central Park, we have to go to all the community boards that surround Central Park. So that's why. So it does seem like arduous, but I get it because it's a public space. It's for everybody and it's a sensitive space. And so we go through this process.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for making it very simple and consumable information about the landmarks process. So what you need from us is a letter of no objection, or when is the deadline for that?
Yeah, I think so. What Landmarks wants us to do is go to every community board, and if any community board has comments, they want to hear them. If you support the project, I think it's called a letter of support or a letter of no objection. They want that letter to know that we've come to see you, we've explained the project, and you've had a chance to respond. So that's why we're here.
It's a letter of support.
Yeah, typically, Brad, we typically have a cooling off period with most letters of support with new items, but this seems to have set precedents and supporters of the institution. If there are no objections, I'll entertain an exception to everyone. Jessica Elliott, you recognize?
Motion to provide a letter of no objection for the Metropolitan Screen Project.
Is there a second?
Second.
Yes, Jessica Elliott has made a motion to issue a letter of no objection to MoMA. Note to Metropolitan Museum of Art, seconded by Jose Altamirano. Please call the roll, or can we do acclamation? Yeah, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Oh, I love this.
The motion carries.
Big
Okay.
fan of the rooftop garden.
Yeah.
Love the neo ancient, very nice vibe up there.
Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Yeah,
And
we'll be back for other projects at some point, so hopefully in person next time.
Would you kindly also to send along the presentations we included with our materials and minutes?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, everyone. Moving along in the agenda, we have our committee discussion on establishing policy to allow remote participation by members who have a qualifying disability in accordance with open meetings law, section 103-8, section 2C. This was just sent out, said we were working on it over the summer with Tommy Best, who regrettably, the chief counsel we've lost. She's moved on. She is actually, her specialty was environmental law. And she got a fantastic opportunity that came up last minute in August in the state. So it'll be disclosed publicly, so she had to take it. We were midstream, so we were able to actually, over the course of very short order, get this put together. It's complementary to some of the resos with CB9, 12 and others, as well as language that was recommended by Tommy. We're not gonna be taking a position on it tonight, but I just wanted everyone to be familiar with it. Angel, would you mind just putting it up on the screen for us, please? And I'm not gonna read it into the record, but I will just, again. The process there, what we're going to do is, just like we've done with other resos and positions. This next month, you have the opportunity to review it, make comments, or if you have a recommended edit. It's basically the process is right there. So if you scroll down, for me, Angel. Very standard, but we have the first whereas clause describing what our committee's doing. The next is dealing with the pandemic, addressing vaccination, hospitalization rates. The next clause is dealing with the original legislation last year that allowed us to be in a hybrid meeting scenario. You can scroll down, please. And you have our footnotes there that you can pull up. And then we go down on the second page, first whereas clause. This is where we've actually drawn out the language from the legislation that's in quotes to make it easy and consumable. And that way, if any member of the public wants to review it, so they're not having to come through all the database in Albany. That allows us to be entirely virtual format in the state of a city disaster emergency. Next, whereas clause is the most recent amendment, which happened on May 3rd of this year to address remote participation by members who have a qualifying disability. And that is also referred to in the footnote. And then it has the next whereas clause is that we did not extend the emergency order, or Mayor Adams didn't. Please scroll down. After that, we have, this is the next appeal, is that we encourage people to participate, video conferencing, everyone plugging in as much as possible. Then to also recognize that we're still learning, and that it is going to be difficult. We've seen the hiccups that have happened this month and even during our executive meetings during July. But giving us a little room for error as we try to abide by the meetings law. And then next where it's supposed to recognize the requirement in-person forum. And that loss could threaten us actually conducting the people's business. And you scroll down, please. Therefore be it resolved, authorizes us to actually conduct, as we've been advised by Tommy Vest as the chief counsel at the time, to how we can conduct hybrid meetings. And then the next clause is that how we would comply with that in the conduct of hybrid meetings, and it's including but not limited to securing the physical locations open to the public, including public notices where necessary, with the documentation, physical location, etc. 3, by requiring CB11 members to be physically present. And this is where we start to get a little bit in the weeds with the disability, but still allowing them to participate. Can you scroll down, please, just a little bit? And then again, allowing these next 2 sections allow us to designate those that have unforeseen circumstances, loss, like say not having a babysitter, you're sick. For those that don't qualify for the ADA, they'd still be able to phone in or be on Zoom and vote when the council votes for them. And then the other one is those that do qualify for an ADA would be able to vote and count for them. And the language is mirrored very similarly to keep it consistent for everyone. Then you scroll down, and then we have, again, that if there is an issue for us to meet in person, we do have another emergency order. The chair, and if the chair is unwell and it's documented, the vice chair would take control and be able to execute and call those meetings in a hybrid or virtual environment. Scrolling down, please. Again, same thing, similar language, being able to execute and being compliant with the entirely virtual meetings. So that's, again, but that has to come from the governor and then from the mayor. And then finally, the last 2 clauses we're urging, and this is something we've discussed, which urges the governor, state assembly members, and state senators to continue to improve open meetings laws and provisions for video conferencing. Again, asking them to potentially consider going back to a virtual environment when necessary, and the same for the city council. So that's, in a nutshell, everything we've discussed. If there are any questions, please entertain, and if not, we'll have more of a discussion and take a position next month. Any questions? Please raise your hands. Okey dokey. All right, no questions? Take a look. If you have any questions, reach out, put your comments, we'll pull them up and go through them in the next meeting. Okay, moving along on the agenda. Thank you very much for your attention on that matter. Budget liaisons report on findings from needs survey and accompanying recommendations for budget requests. Committee provides feedback. We got 15 minutes allotted to this, and Angel and staff. We'll pass the baton for y'all.
Oh. I'm talking about these.
I had a question.
So,
Any question? I had a question.
Yeah, didn't see that hand.
I took it down because you moved on, but I did have a question.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Joel. You're recognized. You had a question on the last item?
I did. When does this take effect? You're saying once you all, so this, what are you calling this, this whole thing, like a change to our bylaws?
No, so what we were advised by the chief counsel, and this was discussed at our previous executive committee meetings, was that and these laws were passed last year and this year, amended for open meetings law on taking
Okay,
position.
I know that, but I'm just to jump ahead. So when does this take effect?
It doesn't.
It does, so we have to take a position to amend our operating procedure.
Mhm.
If you have a qualifying disability, Americans with Disability Act.
I know that. I know that. I just wanted to- Yeah.
Yeah, we have a form that would need to be filled out to testify, like a self-attestation.
Yes,
Right.
I was just asking when it will be.
Oh,
Yeah.
as
Because,
soon
like,
as we
we've had
pass this-
meetings-
We would pass it next month.
Yeah, we would
Okay,
pass
that's-
it next month.
That's it, thanks.
Okay. Okay, sorry. All right, moving back on to the next. Thank you, Joel. Budget liaisons report. Staff.
great. So as you guys know, we are applying. God, I'm so tired. I'm so sorry, guys. As you guys know, district needs an assessment is going on right now. We are creating our district statement and putting in our budget request for 2025. And I'm not sure, are we gonna go over the survey right now, Angel?
Just do a summary of last night's meeting and then the other committee folks, representatives can.
Gotcha. So last night's meeting, we went through the survey, looked at all the numbers of the survey. We spoke to each vice chair who is on a committee that has requests, and we asked them to look over the budget requests that are on our tracker. Make sure that these requests are something that we want to continue to put in a request for, or if it's something that we want to change, modify, or completely get rid of. We've asked everyone to go back to their committees for the month of October to do this. So once it comes back to district need, we will have something to vote on to bring it back to executive so you guys can, so we can vote on that and then bring it over to full board. And once we do that, we will have our district needs requests for 2025 fiscal year. Any questions? So as you guys are all chairs, I hope, and you guys sit on other committees, I hope you help me with the engagement process of this. Please make sure that this comes up in your next meeting. Please make sure that you talk about this, look over the tracker. Your liaisons, the staff liaisons will make sure to have it available to you. So I ask you guys to please make sure that you have those conversations with your committee members. No.
Any questions?
Comment?
Yeah.
Oh, the 60 did this already.
Thank you. You did.
Jess and I and Angel attended a meeting today where they were drawing out how to assess, and they've sent over the presentation, how they codify and how we can better refine our budget requests and how it is viewed from the city's level. And it was a very informative meeting. Steph came on at during the meeting too. And so I think it's something that will be helpful for your committees to review and understand the more granular nature that the agencies, city planning, and how they observe and take and consume everything. We did also bring up, I know during the meeting, the increased pushback with saying, go talk to your city council members, and he put it that they're trying to figure out that particular aspect when it came to budget requests and how the city council members fund things and trying to connect those dots right now, so there's a helpful dialogue. But they're still trying to figure out some quirks. And, so yeah, Angel, I don't know if Jess, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, so I'm pull up my notes from that conversation, that, when they use the please contact OMB for more information regarding this request, they only do that apparently when an agency did not respond in time to the request, so that happened with every single Parks Department request last month, or last year, because of the, changeover with the, commissioner. They also noted that they can help get meetings scheduled. I know for our committee, we reached out to DEP, DSNY, and Parks. And it was very difficult to get the meeting scheduled. And we luckily got, Parks scheduled, and that was today, and was great. But, some agencies have said, oh, well, we're attending borough board, and borough budget consultation, so that we don't need to, attend district budget consultations, which is false. So they said that they can help, reach out to them, and, push them to get the meetings scheduled. So we asked for help on that. And then they said a couple known issues. They said that Parks capital requests and HPD, they only receive an operational budget, so they also must lobby for capital expenses. And there was a couple best practices that I thought were helpful. For, starting the request with a direct statement of exactly what we were requesting. Using rationale to clearly connect, any additional context. Details for like site names or addresses, in the relevant fields. And then, refreshing requests year to year. So we keep a lot of requests year to year, but they develop in some way that it's worth adjusting and refining them year to year. So yeah, that's all I have. Angel?
They also mentioned with regards to like requests that we've gotten a response that this request has been funded in part. So, first, communicate with the agency to, to clarify, which parts were funded, but also another strategy to take is perhaps instead of indicating them on the prioritized list, is indicate them as continued support. Which is not something that we've utilized recently, because when this has been broached to members, when members have taken have drawn the conclusion that perhaps in the item not being prioritized or prioritized high, and added to another list that perhaps it isn't getting the attention, or that wouldn't be acted on, and they kind of clarified that that's not necessarily the case. So that's, I thought that was a good, I was glad for that clarification, because that could help clean up some spaces in our budget request list, should we want to add another one or elevate something, that we in the past, weren't doing because we're trying to keep to the 25 and 40, kind of number of requests per category. But then that was good. And DCP has been, sorry, the Department of City Planning and the Office of Management and Budget together manage this process for community boards. And they've both been, particularly DCP, working really hard the last couple of years to help community boards in this process to improve their statements, their statement of needs submissions and their budget requests. And I think they've also come to understand that there are strategies that community boards have used to, historically with their statements that weren't lining up perfectly for the first iteration of the online form. Historically, there was a separate statement and a separate list of budget requests, and what a lot of community boards would use the statement was to, to state like their kind of their mission or their, their values or, like their policy recommendations, and that kind of got lost a bit with the change over to the digital portal, to the online portal. But they've been, understanding that and making improvements each of the most, recent years, and, creating space and also encouraging the agencies to not just, respond to the budget request, but also to consider the issues raised in the statements of need,
So I just want to say I was unfortunately late to that meeting. However, I love the question that you asked, Jessica, when you were saying when it's interagencies, like how to figure out how to, pinpoint it to the right agency. So I'm glad for that. I'm wondering, are we sharing the PowerPoint that I missed with everyone on the community board, right? Okay, that was my only question.
Yeah, we asked them to send it along.
Yeah, and we're sharing it with everybody in the
Yeah, I
community.
would like for an ideal world. We just came out of the meeting today, so we can get that.
Oh, no, obviously, but I'm just making sure.
I would like.
Obviously
ideally-
not
yeah,
today.
yeah, yeah. No, but. we
I
could
almost
have
didn't make
that-
it here today, so I'll.
Right, yeah.
Hey,
That means, I'd like to ideally with the vice chairs on your committee for them to take it
Yeah.
back, and I mean, obviously you could send it virtual.
yeah, I'm thinking of sending that with the budget request tracker
That would be
all
helpful.
together. So,
And,
yeah,
I think the staff is to be able to wrap their heads around and make sure everyone is aware of that, so, okay, good, any other questions? Okay, seeing none. We will move along the agenda to review the draft agenda for upcoming full board meeting.
I don't have it here, you have it in hand.
Okay, say that again, Nick?
I don't have it here, I have it, you have it in hand, the agenda,
Okay.
it's in your packets.
So I'm just gonna go off this screen. The draft for full board is in the packets?
Yes.
in
You
here.
know? All right, then give me 2 seconds. and I'll-
Oh, my God.
I don't have it. I think you just keep pages. Oh, well, 400%. Something needs to go. So tired.
Okay. So a couple things, we have our public session, our normal. Email, we're gonna be back in person at Dream Charter School. And we'll send out a reminder that everyone will be on time, so you can pick the meeting off. Straight away, the pre-registered speakers will still observe the same 3-minute rule, which is 2 minutes to present, leave a minute open for questions. And I know when we were back in person, John was so kind to sit with a timer where the speaker could see it, and I think that'd be a great thing to continue, or whoever would wish to volunteer to do that. Or we could have it right there on the desk, where the officers will be sitting. Also too, the elected official boards, as you remember, usually it's this meeting, September and January, which tends to call out the most. It will stick as hard and fast to that 3-minute rule for them as well. Only exceptions, the borough president typically at 4 and 5, but Mark has always been very respectful and trying to be brief. Our next 3 items are a public hearing, the statement of district needs and budget request fiscal year 2025. And then 2 is our land use application, and related to the new development on 2226 Third Avenue. The land use committee already took a position on that and voted it down, but we still have to hold this for the law. Then we have 3, the land use application, which is related to proposed Timbali Terrace mixed use development project. This one is probably going to be the most contentious of our public hearing. The way we've discussed, Angel, Jess, and myself, is to conduct it going back and forth, 3-minute rule. In person, virtual, back and forth, so that way everyone's able to participate in getting a fair bite at the apple, if that makes sense. Also too, same thing with the 3-minute rule and recommending, and actually what we're gonna do is hopefully either tomorrow, if I have time, I'm gonna send out the newsletter, note to the chair, encouraging people to get written testimony into us. And at the top, ideally to say support, against, non-accessible, so they have a space, if they just want to put a recommendation. Leave that space open, but I'm encouraging people to give written testimony that land use, once collated by our staff here, can actually put into several files, so it can be read into the record. For the public, we still by law have to afford people the opportunity. We are going to make the recommendation that if there is repetitive statements on a particular aspect of it, we'll try to keep it along and ask for new information. But it will be noted. Yes.
So just to be clear on the process, so we'll have a public hearing at full board, then it'll go to committee. Go to land use in October for them to actually vote on it, and then it'll come back before.
For final ratification, yes, that's how the process will be. We will, again, just getting everyone refamiliarized. We'll go through the public hearing for item 1, listen to public testimony, close out that public hearing, go to item 2, public testimony, close out that item, and then finally for 3. Anyone who says, oh, I want to speak on this, then they will just, if they're saying, I want to speak on 3, and they raise their hand at 1, they'll be back into the queue to wait. That's typically how we've conducted it in the past, but just so we're all on the same page and could support one another on the day. Any questions on that?
How many people are you taking questions from?
And Angel, what, we haven't really decided on a cap. It depends on, I mean, usually we try to have the public hearings done in a decent amount of time, but I mean, if you've gone to Mel's Kitchen and some of the others, they have been there listening until 11 before they even get to the board.
I remember rezoning, that's
Yeah,
450
rezoning,
people.
Yeah,
So that's so how many people?
Yeah,
we
I
have
agree, we
speak?
should have some kind of.
yeah, we will.
Because if we're- The only reason I'm asking is because if we're taking written testimony, then there should be a cap on how many people are.
Yeah, we're gonna have a conversation on Monday, which is our prep call, and once I'm able to get this letter out. Ideally, if we start getting in a lot of public testimony, because we do want people to be heard, that's important to validate all community input. So we'll encourage that, but if they've submitted public testimony in writing, then we ask to reserve time for others who didn't have that opportunity to write.
You gotta be careful, because if we lose quorum along the way.
Yeah, and I don't want to do that either. Because then the meeting.
This is our first full board, right?
Yep.
Person?
Mhm.
It is correct. And I want to,
3 years.
real quick as an aside before we move everything along. I want to applaud everyone here. The only one that did not get quorum was housing, and it was only by 1. Only by 1. At Borough Board today. People are still struggling.
Oh,
So we're doing pretty well, so.
I've been impressed. I
Yeah.
thought it was gonna be.
Just keep
But
them,
I'm saying it's full board, it's a long meeting, we have 3 different public hearings.
we have to have about 25 people for quorum. So going on, business session, if you looked at the meeting materials, very standard, my chair report, I'm gonna try to keep it, even though it's like having to include. Stuff that happened in May, and June and July, and all the other events, I will try to keep as much information purposes, I do wanna highlight some of the great work everyone in the board has been doing. But I will try to keep that brief and set the tone for us going into the rest of the business session. District manager's report, Angel, do you have anything you want to comment on that, or officers report, Jess?
Probably provide a report.
Okay, all right,
There's a lot to say about the summer.
yeah, there is. So we'll try to get that up, and again, setting the trend on the, to lead into our committee reports and action items. Housing, no action items in that form, license and permits, that's in the folder, you can see down below, you can scroll down. These are all pretty standard, approvals. Let's see, the only one that was not approved was item number 5
Where would that delete?
and 7.
Didn't come.
5 and 7, so again, we'll bundle them all. Or we can easily just accept the committee's recommendation, move along for that section and do the same for our street permits. Any questions? The street permits, only number 12 was denied.
I don't know if this is appropriate right now, but I'm just FYI, Diana gave me like a whole speech about how like we gotta get better on license and permit. Because the 2 permits were giving out, on the whole week, like the whole weekend, there was an event on Saturday, an event on Sunday on 116. I don't know if you guys know about this, and then do you know about this? Because if you know about this, I'll just shut it, but I'm just, so I guess they wanted to stop one, but it's 2 different groups that were doing it, and only one group was actually from East Harlem, the other one wasn't.
Yeah, but they bought that up. I believe one came in before, so.
I'm just saying,
No,
she gave me a whole, one,
yeah,
I was like, I don't know.
I think I would,
We follow the committee.
I'll tell her we'll do our best, but I think it needs to be remembered that we're not giving the permits. It's SABO. And they have a first come, first served, because somebody came to our meeting and was, or somebody brought it up, was complaining that, I think the guy with the Alex Garcia with the 116, and we told her like, you need to submit before he does, really, or you need to go to SABO and tell them that they gotta change their procedure, but we're kind of just making recommendations.
Gotcha, I'm just doing
Yeah,
it.
no.
Yeah, so Thank you, Adam. And with that, that was with Alex Garcia. And there was the Hispanic heritage and then there was the Mexican independence stick.
Right, and like, I think the one that didn't happen, the
Well, I
one
think they
said,
both happened.
oh, they both
They both
happened.
happened, but like they were gonna, one of them was gonna be stopped and she had to get involved in it. And I was
Right.
there with her and I got the whole.
You know, there's
And I'm
like,
like,
yeah,
"Oh, you
well,
know
there is,
Guys, one at a time.
there is this thing where like, and I'm gonna say it as nicely as possible, but everyone's an adult and they need to, like, whether it's a liquor license or a street permit, they need to like stop crying because the board didn't handle it for them. Like, we'll help as much as we can, but you need to learn the procedures and stuff if you want to do these events. I mean, I'm all for giving the community things first. That might be a bigger thing to talk to SAPO about, but you know, I can't keep hearing, oh, I didn't fill this out, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, like, do it, because I'll be honest, if I don't do my liquor license in time, I'm not getting it either, so,
I get
you
it.
know.
I hear you.
Thank you, Steph,
I'm not saying nothing, I'm just bringing it up to you guys.
No, I'm not mad. Diana, it's not on.
Yeah, I just put it out there.
yeah, thank you, I'll give.
Cause I got,
Diana a
it's
call.
family. I
No,
don't have that-
All right, guys, we're gonna move along. I'll get Diana a call and get the full one. The next items are environment, open space and parks. Just, you just want to talk on these briefly?
Yeah, so we have two motions. Well, first we talked about our budget request, we have so many, so we're gonna have to parse them down, and we'll work on that. The first one was for the Central Park Conservancy. I had warned them in advance that we have a bathroom equity issue in our committee and our community board, and we're able to pass this letter of no objection for Central Park 2 projects there. And that passed unanimously. And just for clarity, I think, and we've talked about this, but like the letters of no objection, at least I personally feel, and we can have a larger discussion about this, that those can happen like in the same time of frame of a meeting. If it's not contentious, and which is why we voted on this at the meeting, but for letters of support or non-support or something more serious follows that same process of voting next month. So this one should go by easily, hopefully, and like the project that we heard about today, it's just a point of process for anything happening in Central Park, that they have to talk to every single community board that borders. We had a second motion to provide a letter of acknowledgement it's the continuation of the Harlem Greenway Link project north, so from 132nd Streets to 145th Streets. And it's really mostly a safety project to repair the bulkheads and structural elements of the seawall and replace in kind or with some improvements in the cases of some plaza spaces. Any elements of the public spaces that are impacted by the structural repair. In this conversation with the committee, we, again, we talked about bathrooms and I think, Parks had done some work to provide, porta potties as sort of like an interim element to help us out with that. But obviously, we want equity in our, I guess we're not allowed to say comfort stations anymore, it's public restrooms, just so everyone knows. I got corrected many times by Steve today. But the Harlem Greenway Link project has a site right next to the Crackers Whack playground that is providing all of the utilities and an area for a future public restroom. But the funding for that public restroom has not been provided. Parks has applied for a downtown revitalization grant to provide funding for the public restroom, but that would take up literally half of the amount of money that has been allotted to East Harlem generally for the downtown revitalization initiative. So thankfully, the Manhattan Borough President's Office has been working with us, as you know, they have the bathroom initiative. And I think a lot of different moving pieces are coming together to try to get that bathroom funded as soon as possible. So I'm hoping that we can pass this letter of acknowledgement, and if not, then we'll revisit it next month.
Thank you. All right, and Human Services has a letter of motion. The letter, Isaac, you just want to?
Yeah, yeah, really quickly, Puerto Rican Neighborhood Health Center, we passed a motion to support a letter of support for them to be able to reapply for the Human Resources Service Administration's service area competition grant. Pretty much it's a federal, it will afford them with federal funding to be able to continue to provide healthcare to New Yorkers who, or community members who don't have health. So, yeah, pretty cut and dry.
Okay, good. And then we have youth and education day that's not here, but there are no action items. And then land use and much of planning, unless there's on this.
Well, Jessica, as you see there, Jessica made a motion. There was a presentation regarding an already built existing building that come before the committee. And they wanted to, based on, if I remember correctly, the HPD's recommendation to attach two, I think, two adjacent lots, to three adjacent lots, to be part of almost like a rezoning, so that they could do part of the building. I'm trying to remember that it was part of the building is designated as, what was it, technology, science?
Life sciences.
Life sciences, and then the other part wasn't, so the idea was to rezone the existing building so that, and then attach those three lots if passed, so that then it could be all designated the same. And so Jessica made a motion to recommend denial, because if I remember correctly, the person who did the presentation didn't have much answers every time questions were asked. And then actually said that, you know, it really wouldn't make much of a difference other than, because the building was already built. And so I think that we then said, okay. Jessica did the motion, and we all jumped on. And Jessica can clarify more because she's part of the committee. She takes better notes than
Oh,
just.
I did not take any notes, but if they're not able to get the amendment, then they said that they would use the spaces that they were intending to, for the entire building to be life sciences, that the spaces that were not able to be life sciences would be community facility spaces, which could be, you know, doctors' offices or, you know, whatever else. It was also, in regards to the, like, other couple sites that were included, they can't just rezone one single lot because that's illegal. It's called spot zoning. So, and it came with additional things that were not really relevant to the existing buildings, such as an increase in FAR and height limitations that would have affected the other sites that could have been used for mandatory inclusionary housing.
So the whole block is mapped for MIH already. And I think that threw some of the members off, and the questions about there's 3 adjoining properties that would be impacted by the rezoning that's being sought to facilitate this entire building being used for life sciences. Currently, there's a limit on how much they can, you know, how much of their area they can use for life sciences, and that's why they're seeking the rezoning. They were directed by the Department of City Planning to formulate their application to include the whole frontage of that block along 3rd Avenue, and that's why the adjoining 3 properties are included in these rezoning application. It was not their intention to rezone them, but that's the advice of DCP, as Jessica said, because they want to avoid doing spot zonings. So that the committee kind of got tricked up on that. So that was one of the conditions. They didn't want the zoning applied to those 3 adjoining properties. Also had another condition, which I'll owe you the language on. Seeking a commitment to local hiring for the remaining fit out of the building, and also for all post construction jobs, as well, as this would be a fully commercial building. So there'll be plenty of job opportunities, and the committee wanted to encourage the developer and the manager of the building to offer opportunities and make available opportunities for local residents to get those jobs.
Thank you. Any questions before we move on? All right, so it will, the only other thing with the agenda is to draw your attention to public safety. We're gonna have the chair board, so we'll be able to hit everyone in the next section. With that, we'll come back to the chair reports for the and distributing budgets. Executive, we we're having it right now. The main thing, which will include that letter for Metropolitan Consumer Arts, our old business is the ratification of items from July 2023 and June 2023 as well. So those will need to be included there. This we did not have a full board meeting. That I'd like to ideally put all of that together and do it through acclamation. If anything is that someone wants to vote no against, we will ask them to call out that particular number, the action item, so with that way we could keep it very clean. So that's the only thing of note that we'll have to do, and that may, when we get to that stage of the meeting, we'll try to keep it as simple as stupid. That's, keep it supposed to be the right. Yes. Anyhow, that is it. Let's go to chair reports. We'll go to the top. License permits. Do you want to talk about this house? Because John's not here. Do you want to talk about anything with them?
I think,
And then normal.
yeah, I mean, I think just,
You had a good conversation about last meeting.
about what things, so I'll make sure I don't
But you guys were talking about how you thought out about policy. And
Yeah, well,
stuff like that.
right, so we had tabled like getting the signatures during COVID. Cause we thought, going up to people and asking them to sign something, was a little. It went against whatever, we couldn't even meet in person, we're gonna tell people to do that. And then it dawned on me, like, we've gone a couple of years now without doing these petitions, and there hasn't really been an uptick in any kind of issues or 311s or anything. And I always found it a little weird to like go up to people randomly and get these signatures, like, what do you like, wait outside someone's house or whatever, and then half the time to get the petitions, it looked like sometimes somebody signed 25 names and what are you gonna do? Like say this, or there'd be from the Bronx, and then we see it sometimes with street activity permits where they can't struggle to get one letter of support. And if you really look, sometimes you're like, yeah, there really is nothing on that block. So sometimes some restaurants might be able to get 25 signatures like that because they're right under a big building, other ones aren't. So we're thinking of ways to get people more notified about it than just say putting up a post in the restaurant window or on a lamppost. So I was looking at other boards that have more restaurants like than we do, and they're not asking for signatures, but they expand how many blocks around their thing that they put them on all four corners, or they'll print 100 flyers and just kind of distribute them just to get, because the whole point is to get engagement, right? And so I kind of tasked the committee with thinking about, because I don't want to just like make it up myself and say, okay, let's vote on it. I mean, I'll do it if they don't do their homework and say, but I said, if everybody could come back with some ideas. So, and then if they come back and they're like, no, we want to do petitions. I mean, that's obviously on the table, but I just think it's a little played out. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good brief description. All right, next we have. Down, we have our human services.
We started by, so our meeting was actually on 9/11, so we started by just having a moment of silence, celebrating 22 years since 9/11. From there, we had some informational updates, one from East Harlem Coed and another from a new migrant shelter facility located on 124th Street in Lexington, and Hurt on Randy's Island. We had some informational presentations from again VIP Community of Services, which will tentatively is opening up a men's shelter on October 1st, and this one is going to be located on 170 74 East 123rd Street. We also have an information presentation from a group that is interested in doing research work, community-based, I want to say participatory action research, because to the extent that they described it to us, they want to ensure that the community is a part of not only informing their study, but also the design of their study. So in that regard, it would be participatory action research. But the research is just looking at the links between Down syndrome and Alzheimer's disease. So these are two, yeah. So it was a good presentation. But they were very open. The presenter was very transparent, excuse me, with their desire to engage community for designing the study. And then from there, we had a presentation, we went through Bodigan already, and we had another presentation from a gentleman who wasn't 100% clear. I could tell that he hadn't gone through this process of coming before community boards and presenting before boards, but needed some sort of letter of support for some work he's doing with Oasis. It wasn't clear at all. So I just told him that I'd meet with him outside of the community board to just first get a better understanding of what he was trying to present to us, because if we would have did it on the clock, we would have been there on that, just trying to get clarity on that. So I'm gonna follow up with him. I'm still waiting to hear from him. But when I get an opportunity, I'll touch base with Mr. Frazier, get a better sense of how I can help him prepare to present this information to the community board so that he could at least get a fair shot at whatever he was trying to present. And then from there, we just went through the needs survey, all of the feedback given relevant to the Human Services Committee. I also walked through the budget process for new committee members. That was something that wasn't done for me when I first came on, so I wanted to make sure that I went through that. And I'm going to do my best to be as thorough and helpful in that process for people, because that at first for me as a new member was one of the most intimidating parts of being on the community board. But now that I have my feet under me, I think that I can be very, very helpful in helping the rest of the community members feel comfortable with it, so we can better articulate. My goal is really to have the moratorium document match the needs that we're, the requests we're making in our budget. So that's what it should be. If we're saying there's an issue, here's how we're saying it can be funded. So we want to be complete in our advocacy. So
and let's move it along. I accidentally overstepped parks. EOSP, Jess.
Well, I accidentally thought that our last agenda item was this agenda item, so I tried to do it already. But we had a quick summer report from me, talking about all the great work that we did over the summer. It was really an incredible group effort. Monique Nicola had put together a wonderful parks tour schedule, and was just fantastic. We had people join as they could. Not everybody obviously could join every time. Parks Department representatives joined, and that was fantastic. And we really put together a robust document of every park that we visited, including pictures, what we saw in the parks, what we thought might need to be improved, and that helped us to formulate. Malik and I went through our draft requests for the budget, and we have way too many, as I noted, so we will, after talking with Steve and Parks Department today, I think we have a good direction to condense that a little bit. So that's all great. We attended the Downtown Revitalization Initiative Grant public meeting to express the desire for the restroom at the Harlem Greenway Link. And we talked, we had informational updates from our city agency partners. Only Parks was in attendance at our meeting, and had a short presentation on Carmen's, the community artists, upcoming art installation on the East River Esplanade. We had a couple informational updates from our park advocacy groups, talked in depth about our budget, and then had the two motions that we already went through. One other thing that we did at the very end in our old business was invited committee members who had attended events that not obviously all of our committee members could attend, to sort of report and share back, which I think was really helpful in disseminating that information, and also uplifting the people who are doing great work and going to represent the community board in various places throughout time. And I encourage you all to do the same.
Thank you, guys. don't have David here, so land use landmarks and planning, I think we kind of covered, unless there's anything else you want to add?
No, I'm just looking at the agenda, and there was an announcement made regarding the Harlem African Burial Ground Memorial Mixed Use Project that the NYC Economic Development Code has released a request for proposals for the education engagement series for the African Burial Ground. And they were seeking a team to complete the education, and engagement regarding the history and the cultural impact of the African burial ground that's going to be developed. And then we had that discussion, which thank you, Angel and Jessica, regarding that building that's already been built and the life sciences aspect of it. And then we had a presentation from Timbale Terrace. As you are aware, Timbale Terrace have come a couple of times to the community board and has done presentations, and it appears that every single time they present, there's some resistance and contention based more on the aspect of the supportive housing of 99 units, mostly for single adult studios. As the developer has mentioned, they're part of the 1515 project, and the funding to do robust social services comes from there. And they looked at the need, and the need seems to be for more single people to have some kind of stability in some type of housing through studios. I personally asked the question whether it could be revisited for families, because we have a lot of kids that are in shelter, they may need the supports. They've explained that it's not ideal that they can look at it, but the funding there and the way they've done the design is to really be supportive of the affordable units. So, the supportive housing is supported on its own with the funding through the 1515, and then we of course have the other 200, I think, 4 units that would be affordable.
200 units?
So it's 300, right? So it's 304 units, I believe it is. So it is like close to 100 supported, and then the other like 2 or 4 around there. And so it was pointed out by people in attendance, a former speaker, that HPD has not really done a good job with this community in terms of supporting the East Harlem neighborhood plan and what we've outlined as needs. And so it's not purely on the developer. I personally have found that the developer has tried to be upfront and is willing to embrace and do as much as he can within the scope of the project, because as Angel eloquently said at the meeting, supportive housing is supportive housing, basically. We know this community is always a tradition to help. We needed help. And, I'm not gonna paraphrase everything he said, but, I think he tried to bring up the points that, it's a great project. We want arts and things that we've wanted are in this project. So, just to get stuck on the supportive housing without really analyzing it, can actually keep us from acquiring other things that the community has wanted. So, and then, I came from the fact that the meeting went a little bit over long. We did not do a discussion regarding the district needs and budget. And so the meeting was brought to a close. And so that's something that we have to revisit. And that's it. Angel, I don't know if I missed anything.
Back to question. The people who, well, most of the people who are resisting in person on.
I think that there was stuff, we had the chat open, and so people were resistant to the chat.
Okay.
People did get on, not a lot of people did voice their opinion, and they explained why they said certain things in the chat when they were, selected in other meetings,
But no one in person?
We
Not-
had
not
no one in person,
opposing,
it was
but-
more, right, Angel, it was more people that were online Because there wasn't really anybody in person that he has said anything.
No.
I think the application, no.
Yeah, most of the people were presenting.
Right,
There was someone in person that was in support of the music aspect of the
right,
project.
Aurora Flores,
Oh, so-
yeah, so, you know, but if you go back to certain, when they presented, because of other things and the point being, people bring up the oversaturation and things like that. Sometimes it gets conflated. Obviously, they are not putting, you know, a methadone clinic in their, you know, in their project. They're looking to give supportive services. If you look at the idea and what they've mentioned, 50% will be from this community board. If you consider that 50 out of 100 people will be coming from this community at the minimum, right? You're only talking about potentially 50, if the concern is about us, you know, an influx of people coming in, you're basically talking about 50, because these 50 may already be in shelters here, or they may already be in residence here, getting services, and so, you know, like, we have 3 categories in our rezoning, but there's nothing to say that there is a person who has mental health issues can have HIV/AIDS, which will fall into our category. For people who are saying we should be building supportive housing for veterans, nothing is to say that a veteran can be included, because everybody has different facets, so, it's gonna be probably contentions, when they present again, in full disclosure. I was invited to do a tour of their buildings, and, I went today, and our chair, went today, and so we saw, a studio in, Prospero Hall, right?
Yes, for sure.
And Prospero Hall, and, you know, we just voiced our concerns. I went on the record just telling them that I thought the presentation, I didn't feel they did a good job. Because I'm tired at the end of the day to have multiple people talking about, like, one person saying 2 lines, and then we'll hand it over to you, and then I thought it didn't work for me, and I thought that they needed to have more data, and they needed to explain why the funding, why this, and what they're giving. Like, it's not enough for me to get supportive services. If you don't know what the supportive services are and how they're gonna enhance and help people in this community, right? That maybe get living there, and the benefits, it's easy to say no, or to get other things in the mix, so, and that was that.
It was good meeting with Nelson, just to kind of summarize that, and I think with that committee, they're gonna have to weigh it out and really listen and observe everything. I don't, you know, I'll be supportive of whatever this board decides, and we're all 50 members in this together. We fought very hard for deeply affordable housing. And as I said to them in the room, I don't believe there's, you know, throwing the baby out with the bathwater on this one. But it is, you have to come and be an honest broker. And one of the people sitting across there said some things that were a bit triggering and inflammatory, kind of especially given the individuals in the room. So Nelson and I were very cool and collected, and just said, like, listen, you have to make it very simple and describe everything and the ways you're going to be there. And we understand that context, so we'll keep you posted on that. We gave them some homework to describe and bring it back, but we'll need to support one another at full board, and to keep cooler heads will prevail, and just, you know, that's my recommendation. Yes, before I move on to your.
Do we still need to keep this chat option open now that we're?
No, the chat's supposed to be, it was an accident, and Angel said as much in meetings, like, he forgot to kill it. And that
We had it out.
we've been pretty good about that.
Sure.
Yeah, Angel, do you wanna?
Yeah, I was hoping to not talk. But, so like what I was getting at in my comments at the land use committee is that, a lot of work goes into, a lot of the major positions that the board takes. And, you know, sometimes, you know, a position is taken and it's acted on immediately. And sometimes a position is taken and it takes a long time. right? Like so earlier in this meeting, the Harlem Greenway Link was referenced. That's a very, very long time ago. I remember sitting around this table and Francis screaming at us about, that we're deluded, this is never gonna happen, and screaming at agencies. And, this fiscal year, the largest, amount of funding for, parks and waterside improvement in the borough of Manhattan is in this district by a large margin. Because finally they're making the thing happen. So similarly, with this project, it's the result of a number of positions taken by this board, a number of efforts participated by this board. Not just the neighborhood plan, but also the rezoning recommendations that the board made in 2017 and in 2012. Right, during the Bloomberg administration, as far back as that, right, said very explicitly, this board did very explicitly what it wanted to see in terms of development in the neighborhood. Many of those ideas that were laughed at because they were very aspirational and just not based in the reality of that time. Like, for example, at the time, Bloomberg, when you got an affordable housing project, it was 80-20, right? That was always the ratio, right? And we were begging for 50-30-20. Nobody even says that anymore, right? We've blown way past that. Mandatory inclusionary housing was something we made up. It's a watershed law, right? And folks are like, what are you talking about? And now it's the law of the city, right? So people all across the city are benefiting from work done by this board and other boards to make that policy, become a reality. So over the last few months, you all saw it yourselves, so you don't need me to say it. You saw in these meetings what the opposition to this particular project. That is the first project, the first major housing project to come out of the 2017 rezoning, right? And the points of commitment that we reference all the time in there identified 4 sites for 100% affordable housing. That did not happen before. And now it's happening. Well, hopefully. We'll see. And that's the first project out the gate. The next one will be the multi-service center. That'll be in a couple of months. The first one out the gate, and there's this major organized opposition. And I'll give them kudos for being very well organized. I won't give them kudos for anything else. A number of positions taken by this board are being misrepresented repeatedly. And if you're not paying attention, you might miss it. Repeatedly misrepresented. CB11's position is the following. You say it enough times to a person that isn't reading our stuff, they're going to believe it, right? Oh, the community board supported the overdose prevention center.
Not gonna happen.
Laughable, isn't it? No, everybody outside thinks it's true because they've heard it so many times from the opposition organized against this project, time and again. The moratorium resolution that was crafted, that was approved originally to be very specific, right? And a couple of months ago, Isaac spoke very eloquently about one point having to do with that resolution, that it could be used as a weapon, right? I forget if those are the exact words, but something like that's what I heard. And that's what's being done. The opposition is saying about this project that it goes counter to the board's position as memorialized in that resolution asking for a moratorium. When it does, no such thing. There's no additional drug treatment facilities, right? That's not what that's going to be. But if you're not at this table, and if you're not listening to me badger you every month with this stuff, reminding you what your positions are, and you're out there with a little bit of information or having someone scare the hell out of you, you're going to be receptive to those scary ideas, especially if you're walking around a neighborhood that has literally a ton of challenges, right? So you're already a bit apprehensive, and then you're hearing this, oh, they're going to add more of this thing that's giving me apprehension. They're not actually getting the message. This same exact tactic was used during the 2017 rezoning. I had people at meeting, remember Eudora Ortiz, used to be on the board? I remember being at a public meeting with her and her crying to me, Angel, how could you be supportive of this? I'm like, why are you crying? She thought she was gonna lose her home. It was around the corner. I'm like, nothing's gonna happen to your home. I'm like, why did this guy told me, this guy told me, they've been telling me for months. I'm like, they're giving you bad information. And unfortunately, this is a political tactic that is often used very effectively, is, get someone that's a little unsure, get someone that's a little scared, get someone's a little stressed and scare them more. Right? But what I was saying at land use is what the board's positions have been and continue to be are reflected in the project. The issue to discuss, right, is the supportive housing part. And then because the rest of it, it's 340 units altogether. 240 of them are standard, affordable housing. Most of that is 60 and below, some 80s and below, nothing above 80, right? And then the remaining units, 99, because one of them's for the super, are supportive housing, as Nilsa explained, studios for single adults. That's where the conversation, if any continuing conversations has to be had, should be had there. What do we think about the concept of supportive housing? The populations to be served by the supportive housing here. Supportive housing is funded in a couple of different ways. One of them is the New York 1515 program. That program has a number of categories. I think it's 4 or 5 categories that define how a potential tenant would qualify for tenancy in that supportive housing is funded by 1515. And all 5 of those categories have either a history of substance abuse disorder or severe mental illness. So in every category, that's where we're looking at housing in the supportive housing units. And what I was saying at land use is that's the conversation we should be having. We should be talking about that specifically, not about all this other claptrap and nonsense that doesn't come, that isn't actually what's on the table. And as I think Nelson mentioned about the methadone, people think that's what's going in there. Right? Because they certainly haven't been able to hear any descriptions of supportive housing, either because they're not listening or the developers aren't explaining it, even though I told them 100 times. Don't assume that the people that you're presenting to work in your office, right? You can't community boards speak to a person in the neighborhood. You have to speak English or Spanish because that's what they understand, right? You can't say MIH and all the rest of this nonsense. They're not gonna know what you're talking about. Right? So when you're saying supportive housing, people don't know what it is necessarily. They start thinking, oh, it's another methadone clinic. Oh, it's a homeless shelter. Oh, it's a halfway house. It isn't any of those things. It's permanent housing with supports. Essentially, a social worker or a KSAC is there to help you depending on the issues that you need. But you're not going to get your needles exchanged there. You're not going to get the methadone dosage there. You're not going to get your bones reset there. It's not what it is. But people have to look into that to learn it, to then have the conversation about what it actually is, and then make a decision as to, do we want it? Do we not want it? Do we support it? Do we not support it? How do we want it to look? Do we want it to be more family size units, or, of the 99, mix it up, but give, putting forward productive recommendations and, suggestions, with the idea of productivity as opposed to, all like responding to all this negativity and misinformation, right? You guys have all been there. We have the recordings and we have the printouts of the chats. You can see for yourself. Listen and read for yourself the amount of foolishness that's out there distracting, taking up valuable time from all these meetings, when you can actually be having conversations about not just moving the project forward, but actually talking about the aspects of the projects, the benefits, weighing whether or not this is a good project for the neighborhood or not. So,
yeah, Angel, I think that's a really good point. I want to bridge off of that to policy. So when it comes back to land use, one of the things we discussed when we met was how their financing works when it comes to providing supportive services. And we asked, for them to bring back to the table you know, they said, I think the entry was like 50 units to get the funding, just, but then you lose certain things like a security or other therapists that could come in or counselors and whatnot. And we said, what happens, you know, and they said that they've determined over the course of time in their operation that their sweet spot number is at 97. And asked, well, what happens if you went to 77, had more family oriented units, like 1 or 2 bedrooms, if people had a kid, et cetera, and so on. And they said they would take that back and bring that information. That's a policy question to have about how we can be, you know, guiding the conversation about how it's financed, what services are they providing on that support, and again, having a more substantive discussion. So Angel, thank you very much for.
And thank you for that bit, I didn't know that bit, thank you. But all the one thing I did leave out is, and this kind of jumps off from the conversation that led to the creation of the moratorium, right? One of the agreements was that we will be having follow-up discussions with these organizations, right? So similarly here, what do we know about, and what is our partnership with Lantern, is the people that would be operating the place? What do we know about them? How do they work? Are they doing a good job or not? Because that's something to also consider. And some of the allegations are that they run a bad ship, that they don't take care of their units. Well, then we need to look into that to see if that's actually true or not, as we're informing the position that we're ultimately going to take. I did comment during the meeting, and this is, you know, whatever, that if you look on the public, you know, database for HPD, that, you know, that maintains the number of violations, complaints and violations and open violations for a given property, the number of complaints is like 20 something for 300 apartments, right? So it's not that it's insignificant, but to make an argument off of 25 existing complaints where it had been 200 over the last, you know, 2 years, that means they've done work, right? So there's a bit of credit there. Doesn't absolve them of the remaining responsibility for the remaining open complaints, but let's have a conversation about those. And, you know, we don't have to be fair to anyone. Well, we'll have to be fair to them alone, but we have to be fair to ourselves and to our constituency to be weighing actual facts versus just, you know, like, well, that like one person had a leaky toilet. I'm like, okay, that happens. Well, then we talk to the property owner. We're like, what are you doing about the leaky toilet? Right.
No, and it makes sense, and one of the things, I think I got a little passionate. But,
Last one, and then I think we should move on.
yeah, you know, I think that they're going to be addressing, the supportive housing more than anything, because to continue to address something that's positive, makes no sense. You have to alleviate the tension, and so that's what we got out of that today, so.
Yeah, so Adam, and then we'll kind of move.
Well, I'm just gonna ask quickly, I mean, we're saying HPD basically, and I mean, I've had experience with HPD coming as board and not having any answers to anything or whatever. Are we really gonna count on them now? Because like, I feel like it's a good thing for the board to have it on record, like, this is what supportive housing is. Like, why can't we just make that statement for the record? Like, I'm not saying, I'm not designating Angel, but like, what Angel just said, if like anybody, like a 5-year-old would like have just understood what he said, and I feel like, why don't we just put it out there? That way, down the road, they go, oh, you did this, you did that. It's like, well, this is what we said it was, and this is what it is. I mean, I just don't know why we're gonna count on HPD now to come in the 9th inning and do this right.
No, the
No,
developers.
this
Or the
developers.
or even them, like, but why don't we put like our thing out there, like, this is what supportive housing is, you know, because there's a lot of misconceptions there.
Yeah, so to kind of summarize this, because this is the type of discussion that should be happening in land use, absolutely, and then here in this body. Those are the in-depth conversations we should be having, and I think when it comes to the supportive housing component is asking, how do we define it? What do we desire it to be? Is it in keeping with our previous positions? When we take a position, the land use committee will take a position. It can be one of 4 ways, and it's that simple. It's yes, no, yes with conditions, or no with conditions. And we know what those various weights are.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what Adam is talking about. Adam is saying that maybe we should come to the full board or to one of these meetings and just say, this is what supportive housing is.
Yeah.
You have an understanding of what it is
And
before we
that-
make this decision.
And
Yeah, we're gonna have a public hearing, right?
Yeah.
I'm afraid that like there's going to be, for lack of a better word, it could be a shit show. And like, why don't we have somebody sign up from like literally the board and like go first, boom, and get it out there? It might squash a lot of people who are gonna come in and start
But
saying
then that
supportive
also
housing
looks,
is
but
things.
then that also, we're like siding.
Not if we're just defining
Not,
it,
not citing, well, I mean,
not if we're just defining it.
I agree with it done just because
Sorry.
at this point, sorry, I'm out of order, but at this point,
So,
there's a lot of misinformation out there.
yeah, just.
And they're attacking us. So we're not siding with anyone, we are defending
Fact
ourselves.
check.
Okay, that's all it is. Like, I believe that we should have that very similar statement, which we could probably just play it back at this point, because we recorded it just now. But the reality is they're attacking us consistently. We're not taking sides, whether it's this person, that person. We just want to make sure that we clear the air so that it's understood that, you know, and I hear it all over the neighborhood. Right, so I think we should, before anyone else speaks, we should make our position, this is what it is, this is what it is, we're not siding with anyone. But we want to make sure that this is a fact check, and that's what it's done, and I agree with it.
Thank you for that.
No, I was gonna say that I'd be more than happy to be that person to do that, especially with, being able to clarify the moratorium with respect to how that's being linked to that, which is how, like, what Angel was saying, how it's being weaponized. I think the biggest thing here that bothers me, well, I'll stop after this, is just that I never hear the conversation about who we're talking about won't get those supportive housing resources. We're talking about Black and brown men, you know, and it's like, we don't care what happens with them. You know, we only want to take care of, we only want to house families, we only want to house elderly people, we only want to house this, we only want to house that. And it's like, no one gives a F about the men who are out there. So in a lot of ways, it feels a little bit like, it just feels like there's a demographic of people who are just being like, you know, how you want to say, criminalized, ostracized.
Yeah.
These are uncles, dads, brothers, you know, relatives. So, yeah, and it's just, I think it's just easier to target, you know, single men than it is to target
But
families.
one point that I brought up is that a single man can be elderly, a Vietnam vet,
All of those things.
a
like they're
drug
saying.
addicted, mental, because all of us were affected mentally for COVID. So for us to now think that we're all sane.
Yeah.
Please, I'm looking around this table, we are not all sane. We are doing a good job of putting this stuff together, right, based on our lives. But we were affected, right? And so, you know, that's one of the things that I brought up. Explain yourself, tell us what kind of services, so that people are afraid of what they don't know. And the supportive definition has to be the one that's used within the funding source and clinical, and I guess human services can actually also bring up what the human services definition of supports are. But it's not only the public, the board members themselves need that education, because the board members are the ones that are gonna vote.
So.
Just one, 10 seconds, I promise.
Second.
Just I suggested, there's also like, you know, this project is an example, but it's not the only instance where, you know, the board has an opportunity to be more, like, you know, we've been doing a good job of getting out to events and shaking hands and giving out pamphlets and t-shirts and all that jazz. It's great. But also get up, you know, into people's business, you know, like the people at, remember a couple years ago, we had Fortune Society come and present, and they told us about their experience with CB9. That when they came and presented their project to CB9, CB9 was like, hell no, plus cheese. And they're now best friends. And because CB9 just got in there, they're in their doors all the time, they're in their business, they have them there. So there's opportunities for us to, you know, expand our outreach to also like be in spaces, so we know for a fact, right? Be it Odyssey, be it Exodus, be it Lantern, be it whatever.
That's
Whatever and everything.
Yeah, no, thank you, Angel, which is why several of us, Nelson, I'd reach out and get connected. Jessica Morris went, Jason B. Nueva went, and they've done some improvements from when I've been there with Pat Martin and Paulette. Her wife lived there. Right, and they've cleaned up things, but to Angel's point, this is why I'm asking you guys to just please drag along one of your committee members. Go to like, when I go to the TA meetings, and I go, just say, hey, reach out. That's what Angel's saying, is like, get involved, insert ourselves into the situation. And that's how we build relationships. So I'm gonna move us along so I can get people home. Public safety, then eco dev and district aids. Public safety.
Who's that?
Oh,
Right.
huh?
Did you say we need to review?
Do we have anyone?
Yeah, I would,
No,
we didn't have any action.
Yeah, there's no action items.
No, there was no action.
Action item.
It wasn't,
Sorry.
no, the highlight of the meeting was David asked everyone if you could go back in time and change something about the cap, so what it be?
That was actually a really cool icebreaker. And then brother over there shocks me when I'm like, at the very end, it's like, oh, you didn't answer.
Everybody. Yeah.
So public safety, no, that was a good note, thank you.
We have an issue with DOT. They came for us to present on the 128th Street and Third Avenue Bridge. By their literature, it was in the planning phase. It should be in the planning phase until 2025. Literally, this is what we have attached, like we could bring it up. And then when we gave them certain options, because it's obviously in the trend of the city, making it much more pedestrian friendly, which is great. But there are kind of costs to it involving with vehicular traffic, which is a very condensed area in that particular space. It's like you get to either pay the $9 at the RFK bridge, or you can come in for free. So guess what people do? And now they're going to put a light there, a traffic light. They're going to funnel the 128th Street school into that light. And it's going to cause significant traffic regardless of what they say. So we were trying to get some options out of them, but it went from planning phase to concrete, this is what it is. Which is what we were just told at the last meeting. So I'm gonna go complain to Diana Yellow's office tomorrow.
Which bridge?
128th Street and the Third Avenue Bridge, basically.
The pedestrian bridges we removed.
So they're removing the pedestrian bridge that's on the top. They're going to create street extensions to make it easier for, and they're going to put a traffic light there.
Okay.
And I think there would be some better ways to help expedite traffic, considering that we are still the #1 asthma community. And having cars kind of sit there and transition through that space is a problem for us.
It's fine.
So,
You got a question?
Just really quick to that point, when you sent me the ULER for the park that we thought we lost, that was converted to it was Lewis Collier Park that was transitioned to Salt Shed, and that's how we got, Ahmed. Off-Mar Park.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I don't know the name.
In the ULER, it said how that site was perfect because it's the best place for, city agency vehicles to get over to Brooklyn, over to Queens, over to the Bronx, through Manhattan. And I think that's a large scale, problem that we related to what you're bringing up that, what do we do to not have literally everything go through our name?
and if you're on the bridge entering, you'll see that on the right side, there's significant more traffic because there is a traffic light on Lexington. More people go to the left, and even then there's traffic. But now there's gonna be an extra traffic light there. And well, we kind of, one of the ideas we threw at them was a two-way street between 128, 127th. So that we can use 127th Street. A lot of people simply drive up against traffic just because 127th Street is very underutilized. That is significantly considering how heavily 128th Street is utilized. But they told us, no, we're not planning. This is what it is. Anyway, so I'm gonna go. And then the other thing we did was we were working on our first public safety conference, our first annual conference, which we're trying to we were able to get ex-Commissioner O'Connor, who was in charge of youth strategies. He retired in June, which is what kind of kept us back, but we were able to, through Kyoka, we were able to get back in contact with him. And he's going to be our main speaker, and we will be engaging that. We're just finalizing dates now. We're looking before Christmas, before Thanksgiving or after Thanksgiving. because obviously people go away for Thanksgiving. That's all I got.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'd recommend, the next committee, DOT or other entities come before and say, too bad. This is what we're doing. They can always say their position.
Well, I mean, I told them that it's not community engagement, right? They call it community engagement. Like, if you're just going to give me a plan, don't call it community engagement, because you're not engaging me. All you're doing is presenting to me.
In those instances, other boards elsewhere, when I've attended their committee meetings, when it's virtual, and even prior to that, they'll take a hard position.
Yeah.
And say, no, we're against this, and then it's at least memorialized, so we're not just laying back and accepting nothing. So that's just something for all committees to take into consideration. Yes,
I got a public safety question. What's the process for advocating for floodlights right in this block right here? Right, yeah, so like, just thinking about members leaving after these meetings.
The injury, We don't
It's
want
not
to-
easy. We have been able to, it's easier to do it block by block. Like Marcus Garvey, a lot of the issue in the summer is the trees block all the light, so we had to get it lowered. We were able to successfully do that, Marcus Garvey. So really giving them a stretch is, it's not good. We already learned it's not good. It's better to be like, hey, we need lights right here, 117
Maybe one.
Park, and and then let them do that and kind of move forward. And we've been able to consistently do that. But it is still on our.
Yeah.
What's up?
No, real quick on that, we can, with the viaduct project, that's something we should take back to the table, because they.
Oh, because that's.
So that's something-
So you see near 125th Street, you'll
Yeah.
see that they put loads.
Okay.
They're no longer like these super high ones that they had before. They were like these nice low ones that are pretty effective.
So let's, I'll take that in the next. Thank you very much. All right,
Oh, yeah.
Eco Dev and then district needs, let's try and get us out of here. Thank you for your patience. It's a really productive meeting today. Go ahead, just now, and welcome.
We had a good meeting, first meeting, we had a couple of announcements, the same Harlem African Burial Ground Memorial, mixed use project. One of the announcements I found most interesting, City of New York has launched a new job application site, so the site, I guess it's just, it's easier, it's quicker, it's like easier for people to find jobs, which I think is good. They can apply for civil service exams there. I think that's good. Then there was also the last announcement, the New York Forward Loan, the part 2 came out. Some people didn't either apply for the first one or didn't qualify for the second one, but businesses can go and try to apply and see if they qualify for that. If you get up to 150,000.
Which one's that?
What's the name of it?
New York Forward Loan 2.
Thank you.
2. We had our informational updates. Angel added 2 people, which I think is good. He added the Caribbean Cultural Center African Diaspora Institute, which they were already regularly coming to present. And then back to the art space. And they just pretty much informed us of like the summer activities that they did, things that they have going on now in September, and upcoming October. We had a few presentations. Our first presentation was pretty much just trying to put the committee on economic development mission. So people just reminded, what we're here to do. Then Carrie gave her presentation on the bid, which she'll come back and give like updates regularly, but the next step is outreach. So we'll soon be able to, chime in and give our ideas, our feedback. We spoke briefly about the outdoor dining rules. We wanted, Eli Bueno from UMass, he wanted to come in and present formally to the committee, but they're still flushing out things. And I think that their time for finalizing all the rules ends by the end of fall. So he's gonna come back to the committee either in October or November to present once everything's set in stone, so he can give actual facts and not just, things that are still up in the air. And we spoke about the sanitation rules that came into effect, just so that people from the committee also understand when they're walking through the streets and they see like, garbage bags that shouldn't be there before 8 o'clock, or, a garbage lid. So just walk in maybe and let the business owner know, like, hey, listen, I'm from the board, you can get a fine if you leave your garbage out like that, I'm sure they don't wanna hear it, but
Maybe like
it's how.
more.
You don't have to say it from the board, but I mean, I would appreciate it if somebody was to tell me, hey, listen. Don't pay $300 to the city, put it in your pocket and, you know.
Yeah.
And then we had a good conversation about the budget and needs. Why I say that is because looking at our needs for the past 2 years is, you know, a lot of it is vague, not specific. You get the same responses, we know that happens. But a lot of things too, I feel like needed just a little bit more digging. So after I spoke to Angel, very helpful, after I spoke to Michelle, Carrie, they pretty much gave us like a little bit of background information on La Maqueta, why it really isn't a robust commercial vibrant space like what we have on our budget and needs. And you know, I didn't know that the lights go off or the fire alarms go off when they cook. So they, you know, the girl from Bogota used to cook her food in the back and then bring it to the front. I'm like, wow, that's hard. It's hard to conduct business that way. So who would want to go there and open up a business, you know? So it didn't make sense, but then it made sense. And I'm like, okay, so they plugged me into certain people and me and Ann are from now until the next meeting, we gotta talk to Diana, we gotta talk to Elsie. A few other people to see, you know, what things we take on, but edit, because like Isaac said, you want the budget needs to match, you know, your advocacy. If we're out there talking about I'm against that, but we don't understand what's happening, and then our budget needs just something very random and general. Nothing's, it's like a car that's like in park and drive, it's not gonna go anywhere. So I'm excited, Anna's excited, to just kind of see how we fix it. Hopefully. And we didn't have any old business, no new business, but it was a productive meeting. Thank you.
Yes, you had a question?
Just really quick, I sent you an email about Urban Design Forum. They're doing something special with like a basically technical support for small business improvement districts. So
Okay,
you know, happy to help if we want to submit an application as a community board or
Oh,
with
for sure.
in partnership with Uptown Grand Central.
do you know what the deadline is?
I'll tell you in 1 minute.
Thank you, Giselle.
No,
October 25th.
October 20th?
Yeah.
25th.
First, I think, no, Giselle, yeah, Giselle's, you
Your
came
first
to our
one?
July one, right?
Yes.
But our first one is, yeah, so thank you, congrats, and Anne Marie is the vice chair, so a round of applause. Welcome. Stephanie, do you have anything else to add to the district needs of budget?
No, I said it in my
Okay,
presentation earlier.
So, yeah, so every meeting this month, except for land use, I think, has been at 2 hours, which is great.
no, it's a marked improvement.
Yeah.
So I'd like us to be on trend with that.
Let's see what
Even though we had a late start.
I'm saying like we worked, you know, like
I'll
all
say
like
it. Let's see what.
concerned about it a couple of months ago, and like so far, you know.
Let's just keep up the good work, guys. The executive, obviously, you know, we're having it. I'd like to also introduce our elections committee chair, Nilsa Rama. We have one of our members here, Isaac Scott, John Green, Brandon Gillespie, and Jordan Wright, who was on it previously. And just give a few moments, and I will introduce at full board at the end, if we're not too tired. Nilsa, to introduce yourself to the board. So Nilsa, you want to say a few words, please?
So I'm really excited. This is my second go around as elections committee chair. I first did it when I was first on the board for a year in 2015. I'm looking forward to working with Isaac, especially Isaac. I enjoy his advocacy and hearing his ideas. And Jordan and John I've worked with before. Brandon, you know, we're gonna have to forge a bond. And so we have a lot of materials already from previous elections. And the fact that we're coming from COVID and the Zoom, it may take us a while to get back into the sync, but we really don't have time. So I'm going to be speaking with Angel to get a sense of at the meeting, I'm gonna make an announcement that there is gonna be a 2-week nominations period. And the nominations have to be submitted in writing, and then we have to then as the committee, we have to then move that forward to the person who was nominated. And then they have to accept in writing. First, the committee needs to meet. We haven't met. We had an email. And so we're gonna do that. And then there's gonna be a 2-week period in October where we will do that. The committee, if depending on Angel's input. And based on availability, right? In the past, we've had candidate where the candidates had a candidate night. I'm not sure that that'll lend itself this time around because of space issues. But just getting the information, we've had digital where people put in their resumes and things like that, and then the whole board gets it so that they can review once we have the list of nominees. So, we have some work to do, but we have a very, very capable elections committee, and with the liaison, Angel will keep us on track. And just to state, as part of the elections committee, we're not allowed to run for any positions. And even once you accept, and if you withdraw because you want to run, you're still not allowed to run according to our bylaws this time around. So, if somebody on our, like if I decide I want to be treasurer, it won't matter even if I resign because I can't do it this go around based on our bylaws. So I think that the people that you have will be pretty straight up, and we're gonna look to make sure it's as seamless as possible.
Awesome.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond. Thank you again for everyone. So responsibility on following the bylaws. Always a pleasure. And with that, I will move us along to the next item.
The next item.
Next item. Old business. Old business. New business. I do want to see if there's an appetite. We have had this addressed our last executive before. And we would have to move into executive session to discuss attendance. There's one member in question and we have a quick conversation about that.
Conversation or resolution?
Wow, we need to, so,
All right.
Angel, I'd like to, I'll accept the motion to move into, and at the conclusion of the executive session, that will conclude our meeting.
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a motion to move into executive session, conclude the meeting at the end of it. It was second, made by Deb Bree, second by Nelson Ron. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Please let me know when the recording is stopped. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a good night.